right now on the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables.
The minute you begin to second guess what is political satire is the day that the basic fabric of our society is undermined.
Equality for women in our industry should be a priority for us all, as it should be for the rest of American business.
We will hear from the top film executives running Hollywood's biggest studios. Donna Langley, Universal Pictures. Tom Rothman, Sony Pictures. Rob Moore, Paramount Pictures. Stacey Snider, 20th Century Fox. Alan Horn, the Walt Disney Company. Rob Friedman, Lionsgate. I'm Kim Masters, editor-at-large.
I'm Pamela McClintock, senior film writer.
Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Studio Executive Roundtable. Joining us today are Rob Moore of Paramount Pictures, Tom Rothman of Sony Pictures, Donna Langley of Universal Pictures, Rob Friedman of Lionsgate, Stacey Snider of Fox, and Alan Horn of Disney. Thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start. The issue of women being paid less is obviously at the forefront right now. Every major actress is talking about it. Jennifer Lawrence wrote her scathing essay. Is it time now to close the gap? What criteria justifies different pay for an actress versus an actor? And I will start with Donna.
Ooh, right into the deep end.
Happy to be of help.
Is it time to close the gap?
Is it, or, I mean, is there an economic justification for this gap, or is it time for the studios to start saying we're closing the gap, or will actors force you to close the gap?
I don't think it's simple as just saying, okay, let's get everybody commensurate with each other. Of course, I think if we were to ask everyone around the table, they would say, yeah, equality is top of mind always with any minority group. But I think it's part and parcel of the bigger issue. It's part and parcel of the issue of films geared towards women, films that are geared towards a major audience, whether they're more masculine-driven, whether the big tent poles are more geared towards boys. And so I think it's just as consumer tastes shift around the globe and we do see more roles for women, then I think the more there are, the more women who can participate, and I think the more salaries will go up and be commensurate with that. I think the equality in the salaries is just indicative of the equality across the board, I guess is really what I'm saying.
Well, I think when you look at compensation in general, it's so driven by, so much of our business is now about the international performance, so a lot of it is driven by that. We just started putting together a movie with Stacey's old home, DreamWorks, Ghost in the Shell with Scarlett Johansson. She was coming off of Lucy, which had just done a giant number internationally. I don't think anyone would look at what she's gonna get paid for that movie and feel like she was being discriminated against. So I think it does ultimately come to what is the market potential of a given movie in a given role. It certainly feels like where the marketplace is. I know there could be some exceptions, and I think Jennifer Lawrence was looking at a very specific piece of information, but a lot of times it is about what people's quotes have been in the past. She was obviously on the rise. There were a lot of other people who'd been in different movies before. So it is a combination of your current market value and just what your history had been to that point.
But I do think that the issue of opportunity for women is real and it's in front of us. And it's incumbent upon us, as business leaders to really address it seriously. So I think, when you listen to what's happening at the national election level and the conversation that's happening there, it's top of mind about, women's opportunities. And I feel an obligation to look into it professionally in my kind of executive capacity, and also just as a woman in the business. I feel like I probably could mentor more. I could probably extend myself personally more to enable young female writers and directors to have some access and information about how to navigate through the process.
I would just add, I think I agree with what each of my colleagues has said, and would simply add that I don't think gender bias has a place in a discussion about what an actor or actress should be paid. I don't think that criterion should enter into the discussion. It shouldn't matter. But there are variables, as has been said, that do affect what one pays speaking about actors and actresses, what one pays any performer, so that Angelina Jolie, for example, got a lot more money for Maleficent than Daisy Ridley did for Star Wars, but they're both women. It's a function of lots of different variables. But I agree with Stacey that the subject of consciousness and proactivity in terms of equality for women in our industry should be a priority for us all, as it should be for the rest of American business.
Right.
I mean, equal pay for equal work.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is being proactive about trying to deal with this on every level, not just in front of the camera levels. Obviously, we have a high degree of female-oriented films in our lineup, and so we've done, I think, a lot to progress that as far as our in front of the camera talent. But also, it does come down to a marketability issue, and every movie is a different movie and requires a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I'll just say that obviously you guys had Hunger Games with Jennifer Lawrence.
Hunger Games, Twilight, Divergent. So you know, those are all very, very highly evolved, female-oriented protagonists.
I agree with Donna in that, I agree with everyone, but also Donna in that, there's a myth in the business, of course, that young males drive the box office, and the press repeat that over and over again, and maybe a decade ago or so that was true. I don't find that true now at all. I actually think women drive the box office. And we make a number of films. I think the very big issue, and one that progress must be made on, is the presence of women in roles in addition to acting, but other than acting.
Right.
And so I'm very proud of the fact that right now there are 5 movies, 2 that are actively shooting and 3 that are actively prepping with female directors. They're not typical female, quote-unquote, subject matter. We have a first-time woman directing the new Underworld movie. We have a Hispanic woman who's directing Miracles from Heaven. And Jodie Foster's just done a thriller for us. So there is a growing diversity. Obviously, I think more needs to be done. And I think that there is also a certain cynicism that needs to be overcome. I can tell you that when we announced an all, quote, female Ghostbusters, we actually didn't announce an all-female Ghostbusters. We announced that there was Ghostbusters that had 4 women in the leads, and that immediately became the female Ghostbusters. So I can tell you, having seen it, what it is. It's a fucking hilarious Ghostbusters. That's what it is. It's the all funny Ghostbusters. So look, I would, as the father of 2 daughters, I would be the last one to say that we're as far as we need to go. But I do think there's a positive evolution. I think the more that consciousness is raised about it, the better. But it's not altruism.
Yeah.
We have to reflect the audience.
Along those lines, it was reported that Jennifer Lawrence received $20 million for Passengers, which is a movie you put together, or I'm sorry, the latest iteration. How did that deal come about, and was part of this issue, did that factor into her salary?
Well, what factors into her salary is that she's sensational. And I'm not going to comment on the specifics of what anybody makes or doesn't make, but I would tell you this, anybody that's lucky enough to have Jennifer Lawrence in a movie, as Rob can tell you, and I can certainly tell you looking at the dailies every single day, should be very happy to write the check. Yeah.
But were you worried about the precedent? 20 million to a woman. Let's hypothetically assume it was 20 million to a female star. I don't think any female star has been paid 20 million. You guys
you need to check your facts.
Really?
Yeah. Many female stars have been paid 20 million many times before. Julia Roberts, Angelina Jolie, Sandy Bullock.
20?
There are many, many. So check your facts.
I'm glad to hear it. So that you didn't.
So are they.
I'm sorry, Rob, did you have one thing to add?
No, I was just going to make a comment. Not only female directors are obviously something that we all pay attention to, and there's more coming, but if you look at the producing segment, there's a lot of very, very successful female producers that a lot of times go unheralded just because producers historically go unheralded. They're more in the background, but they put these movies together. So there's a wealth of talent there as well that we all call upon.
I mean, Kathy Kennedy doing the Star Wars films, and
Nina
Jen Lee on Frozen,
the Hunger Games series.
Right. Well, Bradley Cooper had said he might talk to his female stars, and that sounds to me like the beginning of a megastar labor union. Is that something that concerns you, that the talent will get together like the Friends did back in the day and they negotiated jointly?
This is America. And
you're all good with that?
They can get together, they can, whatever, whatever. We'll deal, it's fine.
It would be remiss with 2 powerful women here sitting at this table to ask, what have you experienced in your own career when it comes to this?
Stacey and Donna look at each other.
I was lucky enough to be mentored by
You were mentored. Okay, well, let Stacey go first then.
I have, I've benefited from, you know, working for and alongside men that just wanted the talent that the women could offer. I mean, honestly, if you can read as many scripts as Donna and I read, if you can write notes off the top of your head as soon as you're done because you want to get it over with because you've got other family or business responsibilities, they're only too happy to be the beneficiaries of that diligence. And I've also worked with great women executives, you know, Donna and I at Universal back in the day, and now I'm fortunate I've got 4 production heads hired by Tom that are these incredible, experienced, strong women. I mean, these are strong women.
I'll just clarify, hired by Tom, who used to be at Fox, and
right,
now
right.
you have
so there's
team.
Emma Watts at the main division, Elizabeth Gabler at 2000, Vanessa Morrison in animation, and Nancy Utley and Claudia Lewis at Searchlight, and we all work together, and it's comfortable and it's fun, and we can segue from business to babies to shoes and back around again. And so I do feel like there's a lot of welcome and opportunity for women in the business. The thing that Jennifer Lawrence did say that struck a chord with me is the techniques of women in terms of being liked and being polite. And there was a great thing on the internet about how women would say great quotes if asked, you know, so instead of ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, the woman's version would be, you know, I have this idea, and I'm not sure if I should bring it up in this meeting, but it seems that if we all pitched in, we could do a lot for the country. And I do think that that part of it, in terms of just finding your swagger and your stride, could be the next step.
I admit I draw the line at shoes.
Donna, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think Stacey, you know, said most of what I would say, and I echo her thoughts. I've been really fortunate to be mentored by a number of different people, and, you know, Ron Meyer comes to mind, obviously, as somebody who I think, you know, during his career has picked amazing talent to, you know, help him run companies for him. I think to Stacey's earlier point, though, mentorship for me is really important because I do see the strength in people coming together around this issue. You know, this is, given that this is the one that we happen to be talking about, there are a number of issues, but just being able to sort of talk a woman through her life planning and helping a young woman, you know, figure out how to start a family and maintain her career. Those things that, you know, they may be more comfortable talking to a female colleague about rather than a male is, you know, those are things I think that are on offer. They're very easy to do, and you know, and I think that they're important. I think they're important to sort of encourage those conversations. I actually do a lot of mentoring with college students, with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and also overseas as well. I'm on the board of Vital Voices, and it's a mentorship capacity that I hold there. And, you know, so bringing a lot of attitudes in from other places, you won't be surprised to hear that around the world the issues are exactly the same. So I think it's just about demystifying a lot of it too. I hate the question, can you have it all as a woman? No, of course you can't. Who has it all? Nobody. You know, I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to figure out, men and women? I mean, come on.
Alan does.
And also...
He's got it all. He's got Pixar, he's got Star Wars, and he's got Marvel.
And he's got great kids.
Donna has all the grosses this year. So
Yeah, just this year. But we're all trying to figure out how to make it work and how to create that life-work balance. That's something that we're all figuring out.
There was a shot fired across the bow with the Star Wars trailer.
He broke the internet.
I mean,
it's very exciting. We've been very excited about it.
But how do you manage expectations for Star Wars?
Well, management of expectations is something we are dealing with because Wall Street has its own set of expectations, and we keep reading every day of what the picture will do. And I think it would.
What picture?
Well, in fact,
a little movie.
Well, it was in tight competition with another picture, which was a golf picture called Par Wars, but we dumped it. We just dumped it. But I have to say that the management expectation is one of the elements in our equation, of course, and it would be a shame if our picture went out, I'll pick a number, did $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion, $1.5 billion worldwide box office, and people are disappointed. That would be a shame because
he's managing expectations right
now. You started with $1 billion.
He's managing expectations right now.
I almost said this picture could do hundreds of millions of dollars.
That's going to be a riot.
Okay,
We're going to say that.
I want to go to you, because you are, more than anyone, you have a stellar reputation for projecting.
Well, the thing that gets lost every year, and I don't know, I have to have this conversation every year, because we're silly enough to open a movie the week before Christmas, pretty much every year, and I have the same conversation every year. That weekend before Christmas leads to the best multiples, but is not the best opening. True. Avatar opened at 70.
Titanic opened to 25 and went on.
The Hobbit has the record at about 85, a little under 85.
You have the biggest movies of all time, which that weekend no one's opened at $100 million, but yet somehow I read recently somebody predicting a $300 million opening weekend. That doesn't make any sense, man. So the fact that Jurassic Park in the middle of the summer can open at $200 million doesn't make sense of what you can do the week before Christmas. Now, by the way, they might do that same number 3 weeks in a row, whatever they do that first week. They may do it 6 weeks in a row.
I agree.
What do you think?
Rob is right. Rob is right. No, but you can't. No, but there is historical precedent, and we have box office results from hundreds of movies on that weekend, and the record is not even $85 million.
Look at Titanic. Titanic opened in the 20s and did 14 weeks at the top.
Okay, Alan aside, does anyone at this table really think this movie won't open north of $100 million?
Oh, north of 100. I think that is a very likely.
Talking worldwide
but like I
here?
said, the number that I saw thrown out was 200 to 300. That doesn't make any sense.
I got a better answer for you. I don't give a shit.
Well, but
I mean, because it's certainly wonderful for Alan. It's great for Disney. It means the $4 or $5 billion, whatever it was, they invested in Star Wars, a fantastic investment. I think Disney has a brilliant strategic approach to the business that we're all dealing with, and Star Wars is going to be a massively successful movie. Whether it opens to whatever it opens to, it's a multi-billion-dollar asset. And the issue for the people at this table isn't what it does this weekend. That's your guys' navel-gazing and good luck and have fun. But we don't care, because the issue for the business is, it's not that. They have 4 or 5 more of them already on the dates. They're dating all around the calendar. And what is the business? What are we going to do? What are the rest of us who are charged to program for an audience going to do? What does it mean with respect to the rest of the marketplace at Christmas? These are the questions to ask. The question to ask isn't what is going to open. The real question to ask is, which is a new world for us. I don't think anybody knows, will the box office expand so that the Star Wars numbers are on top of the rest of a traditional Christmas box office, or will they eat from other pictures? That's the salient issue for the people here at this table and also for the audience.
Well, you have a lot of you have movies opening around that time. For instance, do you think Concussion, which is your movie, can work?
Geez, Pam.
No. Let me
That's a hard one.
Let me rephrase it.
Let me think. Let me think hard for a minute to give the right. Yes, we think it
Let
can
me
work.
rephrase it. Do you think there is enough room for other movies at Christmas with Star Wars?
I certainly hope so.
Of course.
Well, the year Avatar came out, the marketplace was probably the best Christmas ever, and you had $200 million.
Yes, but the difference, but I will say, the difference with Avatar, I think the business was entirely different then, and we confront entirely different obstacles now.
Let me just say,
was a purely original movie.
From our standpoint, first of all, we can't talk about this without me recognizing and acknowledging the fact that this Bob Iger fellow has the courage to go out and buy Lucasfilm, buy Pixar, buy Marvel. So I get to have, under the umbrella, these amazing collection of assets which allow us to pursue a tentpole strategy, which we have wholly embraced. And then when you think about Star Wars, at the end of the day, the facts about the opening weekend are true, and Tom's comments and Rob's comments are correct. So what it will translate to is the quality of the movie. And having seen 4 or 5 cuts of it, I think J.J. Abrams did a sensational job. I really do. And Kathy Kennedy producing it, and our actors and actresses and all that. It's like sitting down and playing a hand of poker and knowing before you sit down what your cards are, because I've seen it, and the folks at Disney have seen it. And
Have all the actors and actresses seen it?
no, not yet.
I think just
so it's exciting.
going back to what Tom is saying, I mean, the good news about a movie like Star Wars is it invigorates audiences to go back to the movies. And I think that drags along everybody. And so that's a good thing for us. I think it's a good thing for movies. The issue about how much room, you know, the further out that you are from the opening of Star Wars, obviously the more room becomes available, because our business is one of decline, not one of increase. So, you know, we calibrate the decline weekend to weekend.
Right.
So the issue is Star Wars, because of when it's opening, could be flat weekend to weekend, if not grow on Valentine's Day, the way Titanic did. But putting all of that aside, I think it grows the audience base in general. So unlike an animated movie, which does bring in a whole different set of moviegoers, and so is completely additive, I think Star Wars obviously will add a fair amount of business, but it is going to cut into all of us as it relates to
And I think the answer is that we don't know. So, but the point I want to go back to is I think the world is very, very different now, because I was involved with both of those, the two biggest films of all time, both of which did go out over Christmas, Avatar and Titanic, both of which records were achieved over multiple weeks. It goes exactly to what Alan said. People love the movies, and there's no replacing that. The issue is both of those were original movies. Right. Star Wars is a pure brand,
well, you're leading me
and
to the
Disney's
next
strategy
question.
is a purely branded strategy. And I think the question that keeps me up at night is there room in the modern business for originality? Or does it need to be entirely branded business?
I would go to the point that's underneath both what you're asking and what we're debating about Star Wars, which is that what really is the theatrical experience? Because what we saw this summer and what we've been seeing over time is that audiences go out to the theater when they feel galvanized to share in that one big thing. And we've seen a kind of feast or famine attitude towards what is of value. And so whether it's a small movie like Pitch Perfect or our movie The Martian or a giant hit like Jurassic, the idea for a theatrical experience seems to be that event around which audiences can come together. It's a social experience, not just in the theater, but online. This is good. They're using social media to make their choices better than we're using research to predict outcome. And so I ask myself, what's galvanizing?
Well,
what's
I want to ask you,
theatrical?
Stacey, I mean, on the dark side of not The Martian, you had Fantastic Four. We've seen some amazing flops.
Right.
Tomorrowland, Alan, even despite your breaking the movie business, you or owning it, you had that one. Jupiter Ascending and Pan recently for Warner Brothers. And studios keep doing this thing, right, where they are going to date the movie and back the picture into it. It's expensive, and it's superheroes or something recognizable intellectual property. And I just think that we've seen the pressure that puts on movies, right? We've seen it over and over again. And I'll start with Stacey because of Fantastic Four.
I don't think the pressure on the movie is based on the release date. You know, the proximity between, greatness and catastrophe is very close together. And what we're charged to do is to create an experience for the fans that is unique and exciting, even if it's within the framework of a branded Marvel film. And so you reach and you try to approximate what a director's suitability is to the material. And if you didn't take those chances, you wouldn't get, Matt Reeves rebooting brilliantly the Ape series, or a young filmmaker like Wes Ball finding his audience in great footing in the Maze Runner series. And so, to me, the disappointment of Fan 4 wasn't about its release date. It was that there was a miscalculation, and that same reasoning can produce incredible surprises, and that's what the audience is asking us for.
Well, are you going to be more careful about vetting directors?
I think that whenever you have failure, I feel as a leader, it's my responsibility to put it on the table, put the cat on the roof. What went right and what went wrong. But at the end of it, once you take away your learnings and you take the responsibility for the decision, the worst thing you can do is crouch. The worst thing you can do is duck and cover, you know? You have to dust yourself off and say, you know what? We're going to take some swings and try to go through the same vetting process, and it's going to work more than it's not.
You know, I would just add to that when one of our studios embraces a film that represents a tentpole kind of picture, when it works, it really works, and the success is heralded around around our business and in every medium and all that. And when they don't work, they get a lot of publicity. So that we had a picture called McFarland USA that was not really a moneymaker. We're very proud of it. We love the film and all that, but it just came under the radar. No one really paid any attention to it. But when Tomorrowland didn't work, that was huge news. And yet we have embraced this philosophy because a version of that galvanizing experience would be that I believe a prospective audience member asks himself or herself, do I have to see it now, and do I have to see it in the big screen? And if the answer to both of those is no, we have a problem. So when you have a relatively small movie like Pitch Perfect or Compton or Fault in Our Stars, and you say, okay, which is under you, I guess, Fault in Our Stars, you say, okay, do I have to see it now? Yes. Do I have to see it big screen? Well, maybe not, but I have to see it now. So there's room for pictures to work that are not sort of event movies, but when these event movies don't work, it becomes big news.
So with Ant-Man and a couple of the recent Avengers coming in a little bit less than maybe everybody expects so much from Marvel, do you worry about fatigue on comic books?
I think that the discussion, the issue of superhero fatigue or event movie fatigue is a valid discussion. We are very happy with, again, we did almost $1 billion with Avengers 2, and there had already been a first Avengers, and the idea of getting these men and women together on another film was not like groundbreaking, fresh news. We went back to the well, if you will. We're thrilled, but we'll do those all day. And Ant-Man, which opened in China, now may not know that 1456 BC was the year of the ant in China. Helped us.
Did not know that.
But we're thrilled with these results, and the folks at Marvel. I mean, the Marvel people have very little to do with the people at Lucas. The Lucas people have very little to do with people at Pixar and so on and so on. So we have separate entities. Our structure is, I think, different than it is for most of my colleagues around the table. Different kind of setup.
So, Tom, obviously the Sony hack was the biggest cyber attack in history. I guess the question for everybody is, at the time, most of the other studios stayed largely quiet. Does anybody regret not coming more to Sony's defense?
Well, what was there to defend? They were assaulted. Everybody knew it.
Or come to their side or express active support?
By the way, we all dug in and started checking our own stuff.
Oh, I'm
to
sure
make
you
sure
did
that we were not vulnerable. By the way, all of our colleagues talked to the Sony colleagues underneath the sort of press of it all.
Right.
Everybody was working together. The Sony people were working with all of the other studios around town and so on and so forth, exchanging information with the FBI, et cetera, to try to understand what happened.
Was it a mistake to make the interview that way with sitting head of a state, even if, well, maybe especially a paranoid one with nuclear weapons? What do you think, Tom? Are you going to second guess that?
No. I think the day you start, you as, of all people, of members of the press whose very existence is based on First Amendment, the minute you begin to second guess what is political satire is the day that the basic fabric of our society is undermined.
You can't blame the studio. They broke the law. It was an aggressive act, and, you know.
Well, I'm curious, so did the rest of you guys work with Sony sort of under the radar during the hack?
No.
Oh.
No, I would say I agree. No, I mean we did what Robbie's talking about. They all
checked to make sure they evaluated their own thing. Right. And the lesson of that is when something like this happens to you, you're going to be alone in the fight. That is what it is. You're alone in the fight, and I certainly would not wish it on anybody. But I can tell you what that makes in any battle. When the team is alone in the battle, it makes for you to pull together and to turn to each other. And there was great resiliency at Sony, and I think that that's the reason that we've been able to move beyond it and move past it, and it's ancient history for us now.
Did anyone discover any vulnerable areas that they fixed?
We probably wouldn't discuss it if we did.
I was told by the head of one company, he was told by his IT people that it is impossible to protect.
Well, you're watching the news
CIA,
today? Yeah, you're watching the news today.
Was hacked and the FBI.
So you kind of do business knowing that.
Yeah. Imagine that what you write is going to be sent, seen, read, broadcast.
Right. Yeah.
You know, be professional.
Exactly. I have to say, though, that, you know, that might have been the gossip that the members of the Fourth Estate, you know, wallowed in. But that's not ultimately the issue for every company in the world. It's not that. It's not your emails. It's the substantive work product and your systems. And the answer, this is why I'm so proud of the fact that the work that's been done and the fact that Sony has been able to put it behind us, because the answer to your question is yes, every company in every industry is vulnerable. It was state-sponsored terrorism. It's extremely, extremely sophisticated. As Robbie says, look at the news today. They're hacking the Pentagon. They're hacking the FBI. They're hacking the federal employment files. Yeah. Okay, and we all, I think, are conscious. You know, it's a pretty simple thing from an email point of view. Pick up the phone, but it's much, much more profound than that. Yeah. You're talking about substantive work product and IT systems.
With digital delivery, digital delivery is very vulnerable as well, just like any computer system. I mean, so piracy is obviously a critical component of everything we pay attention to daily.
I mean, the last question on the subject, I mean, Stacey brought up the emails, and obviously your point is well taken that the larger issue is there, but what was it like for you to be in the position of having your emails revealed?
Oh, it was fun. I enjoyed it. And, I really admired the self-restraint and the dignity of the press. And, I just thought they really behaved impeccably, given the fact that all that private communication was stolen.
Right. It was, in fact, stolen. Rob, let me ask you about the Benghazi movie. So it has political overtones because we've seen what's going on Capitol Hill with the hearings happening and the question of whether the focus is even on Benghazi anymore there, but your movie stirs the pot, this attack. Have you been contacted by any political people trying to dissuade you?
No, I mean, obviously we've had an amazing relationship with Michael Bay, and so this is a story he was excited to tell. It is based on a book, and it is about the guys on the ground and what happens when all hell breaks out and no one is there and has your back. And these guys rally amongst themselves and save a lot of people. And that is the story in the movie. Nothing takes place in Washington. There's no conversation about that. The conversation are what is happening on the ground and how do these people react. Right. And so, so there's gonna be some people who are sensitive to any topic where somebody may not have done what they hoped they might have otherwise done in a situation, but these guys actually did what you hoped they would do. So when you have the story of heroes and amazing courage, that's the story that Michael Bay was inspired to tell, and we were happy to support him because he has been a great partner for us.
But you're not worried that it will get caught up in the crosshairs of Hillary Clinton's campaign and that Republicans are going to use the movie to attack her further?
I think when you look at our job, it's what you were talking about.
Right.
Like, we are trying to tell the most compelling stories that get people to come out to a movie theater. Sometimes there'll be some politics involved, but this is truly supporting a filmmaker who's been a great partner of us in a story he wanted to tell.
Okay. And Rob, along those lines, I know this happened several months ago, but it was recently revealed that Lionsgate isn't going to make the Hillary Rodham Clinton biopic anymore.
We never were going to. I mean, a script was presented to us, which we took in and reviewed and debated and discussed, and just felt the commercial viability of it was not something that we wanted to do.
Okay.
Now, you are sitting side by side here, so I guess I'll just double the question. Rob, are you looking at taking James Bond away from Sony? And Sony, what can you do to keep James Bond, or do you even want to? It's very expensive.
At this table doesn't want to take James Bond?
I don't know. Tom's a fiscal conservative.
Everybody alive, including the Hollywood Reporter, would want James Bond.
We are in cross cycles,
and we're very pleased that we're the incumbent. We've done very well by the franchise. The last one did over $1 billion, which was far greater than anything that's done before. The Broccoli's and Sam Mendes made a fantastic movie, but Sony certainly delivered well on its end of the deal. We have great high hopes for the new one and for the future. So we shall see.
What do you think, Rob?
As Tom said, they had a spectacular performance on the last movie. But at the end of the day, is this business, and then also becomes about economics. So what that means in terms of the future, it's hard to tell as you're sitting here. Is that 3 weeks before the next Bond movie?
Mm-hmm. Donna,
yes.
You have had a remarkable year. I think everybody...
Here.
Everybody,
congratulations.
Really hitting it on all cylinders. So how do you keep that momentum going?
Now they're going to tell you, Donna, that your comps next year are better.
Exactly. What are you going to do with those comps next year, Donna?
Right. I used to say, I guess we shouldn't have made Avatar.
Exactly. Same with Titanic. You shouldn't. Oh, it's too bad.
Too bad.
So how do you keep the momentum going?
Well, look, obviously this year has been extraordinary, and we're very grateful for it. And, we can sit here and be objective about it and say it was part strategy, part timing, a lot of luck. And we don't have a magic bullet, we didn't all of a sudden invent a formula for the movie business. And, as Stacey was just talking about failure, out of failure does come a lot of self-reflection, and our studio was beleaguered by it for a very long time. And the last 3 years, they've been good for us. So that's great. So what do we have as we sit here today? And I think part of the success, to really think about it is largely down to a good, strong operating rhythm. And I think that looking at our ownership, looking at our management, it's the best it's been in a very, very long time. And that really is resulting in the company just sort of working. When I reflect back on when the product wasn't so great, I could look at it's not about an individual, but I could look at the ownership. I could look at lots of things, and the momentum wasn't there in the same way because the operating rhythm wasn't what it could be. And so we do have momentum. And so that doesn't mean to say that our slates are going to be fabulous and we're going to replicate this level of success. This slate was never really intended to look this way. As you know, we move several movies in year for various different reasons. So as we move forward, we take our learnings. What did we do well? What do we not want to do again? And but I do think, one of the things that we certainly have a good rhythm. And so some movies are going to work, some movies are not going to work. And I think one of the things we have taught ourselves is that, we don't have the plethora of IP as we've talked about with Universal for many, many years. We don't have those sort of inbuilt franchises. And I think for a long time we didn't quite understand what franchise meant. We would sort of look at our counterparts around the table here and say, well, I want that. And, well, you know what? We weren't necessarily equipped to do it that way. And so I think one of the things we've been able to do is say, a franchise to us it doesn't necessarily need to look like a Marvel movie. It can look like Pitch Perfect. It can look like 50 Shades of Grey, movies that are made for a modest amount of money with a high profitability.
A couple of specifics along those lines. Obviously you have two franchises that really do meet the definition of giant franchises, which is Jurassic World and Furious.
Yeah.
So when do you think we might see Jurassic World 2 hit theaters? 2018. And do you think that will be tough meeting that date?
Right now, no. There's no reason why it should be. Colin Trevorrow is busy working on an outline. He's been working with Stephen, and They have an idea for the next 2 movies, actually.
Oh.
It was designed as a trilogy.
Okay.
Unbeknownst to us when we greenlit the first movie, but now we're really happy about that. But no, it's a happy surprise. No, Colin and Stephen have cooked up what sounds like a really fantastic idea with Frank. And
I'd like to say, and I admire the modesty, Donna's modesty, but I think there's also a common thread of quality that has permeated your films that I really believe you will carry forward in the ones that we'll be seeing in the years to come. I think you deserve a lot of credit for that, not just because you're sitting here.
Now, Furious 8, will that meet its release date?
Yeah. It was important that we hired a director on the time frame that we did, and so we just, we hired F. Gary Gray, coming off of a big success for us with Straight Out of Compton, and we're really excited about it. And so we'd already been working on the script, so we were already quite far ahead on that one. So yeah, they're on track.
Now, did you consider hiring Vin Diesel to direct?
No, by the way, that wasn't part of the conversation with Vin either. Vin is, I think unlike many actors who, they sort of play their parts and then they go off and play other parts. And, even when Vin is off playing another part in a different movie, he's living, breathing, sleeping, as Stacey will remember.
He was going to be calling me. So.
Yeah, probably. But he's in Fast and Furious. It's in his, it's just in his DNA. He's constantly talking to his fanship, and as are members of the cast. And I think it's actually what has really helped the franchise grow over the years. And so he has conversations with his fans. He wasn't actually talking about directing the movie himself, but he was talking about looking at other people who had been part of the franchise before. But he is really excited about Gary.
Thank you.
Alan, I'm going to segue back to your IP, the marvelousness of Marvel. Kevin Feige made news. He managed to break free of Ike Perlmutter, who is the very controlling Marvel entertainment chief. Can you just give us a little insight into how that came about?
Well, no, but what I will say is that we moved Marvel onto the studio lot, so they're with us in Burbank.
But that was a bit ago.
It was a couple of years ago. And now this is just an organic assimilation of Marvel into the rest of the company, and it operates really exactly the way the folks operate at Pixar, at Lucas, Sean Bailey's group, the internal group, Disney Animation. Each of these groups has a lot of autonomy, and they have earned the right to make a lot of decisions on their own. But Kevin's 50 feet away or 150 feet away, and it just made more sense to have everything organically under us. But beyond that, I wouldn't discuss.
I mean, they're known for very tight fiscal constraints. Do you think it eases a little bit without Ike in the picture?
I think that well, first of all, we are going to continue to run it very much as a business. I know we got a lot of calls from agents saying, okay, can we just double the...
And you said sure, right?
But Ike is a superb businessman, really, which is why I guess he's worth so much money, and he's a good guy. I get a kick out of him. Yes, it's true that we have made a transition away from that management and leadership directed from the East Coast. It just started to feel increasingly inappropriate as we all got closer to it in Burbank. So there's nothing more I want to say about it.
Rob, you released the final Hunger Games in November. What does the future look like for Lionsgate without Hunger Games? And now, obviously, Twilight's over.
They're never really over. They live on. They live on with audiences, as you saw, Stephanie, just 10th anniversary of the first Twilight book, and she was asked to write a foreword. She ended up writing a companion book. So Stephanie is very immersed in the Twilight world, as are the fan base. Same with the Hunger Games fans. I mean, we've taken a small idea out of the Disney and Universal lexicon. We have location-based entertainment that we have been growing now for the last couple of years. We have theme parks that we are working on and that will come to fruition in the very near future. We have stage play based on the Hunger Games coming out shortly. So we're doing everything we can to continue to have the fans not lose sight of the universe of Hunger Games. So
I mean, is there a world where you can do what Warner's is trying to do with J.K. Rowling and squeeze?
We did a movie at Warner Brothers called Never Say Never. It was a Bond movie.
I'm hearing a kind of a yes here.
I'm not saying yes, but you know, the world. Listen, our jobs all of our jobs are really to keep our fans invested in the movies and television shows that we bring to them for entertainment value, and that's what we keep trying to do, is just keep them invested in them.
I mean, are you worried? What do you think about the state of YA?
Listen, young girls are going to always be around. That's the great news, as are young boys, older girls, older men. I mean, everybody thought that Twilight was really a YA franchise. If you actually looked at the demographics of Twilight, it was 8 to 80.
Yeah.
You know, it was really tougher to get the guys. You know, we eventually got to about 22% male. But 8 to 80 still continues to be. You look at the readership, you look at the growth. Hunger Games is not just YA. It never has been, really. I know it started off as a property that way, and it was listed on the New York Times as a YA title.
Right.
But, you know, most of these titles, when they grow, you know, dimensionally. So I don't think any audience is dead. I mean, I think they're all just waiting for the next movie that they want to see.
You know, you're making me think, circling back to the gender thing, it seems like what we've seen with a lot of these movies, Fantastic Four or Colin Trevorrow on Jurassic World, if a guy directs a movie, no matter how minuscule, that nobody has ever heard of, but shows something, suddenly he's on a tentpole movie, whereas we're just talking about Twilight, you know, there was one by a woman, the rest by men. Why is it that we think the girls can't direct the big tentpole movie?
I mean, I can say with my hand on my heart, when we sit down and we're creating our lists or we're interviewing people to direct a movie of any size or scale, there is an agenda bias. I know I can say it because, you know, female director X walked in and said, I want to be considered for the next Fast and Furious, we would have a conversation. I think the pool is a lot smaller. I really believe that the pool of female directors is a lot smaller, and I won't debate here, or, you know, happy to, but I don't have all of the answers as to why it is. But Colin Trevorrow wasn't just a guy who directed a movie that was in Sundance and he was discovered in Starbucks. He was sitting in the chair next to Brad Bird and talking to Steven Spielberg and out there almost interning with Frank Marshall and Kathy Kennedy. He was somebody who directed Safety Not Guaranteed almost as a way of proving that he had a certain tone and a certain sensibility that could then enable him to have conversations about what would be next. Mind you, I don't think he imagined in a million years that what happened with Jurassic World would be the next step for him. Yeah. But, you know, he was very clear about his path, about what he wanted to go on and do. Now, that is certainly not to suggest that there are not female directors who also equally want to go and direct, you know, big tentpole films. But I think the pool is small. Elizabeth Banks, by the way, is somebody who...
Well, we just hired Elizabeth Banks to direct Charlie Angels.
There you go.
And that is a big, kick-ass action tentpole. It's not tonally at all like the show was. It's a very visceral action film. And
her directing, Pitch Perfect, was very much a step towards her being able to go and put herself up for a film like that. I mean, it was very intentional that way. I was sad that we didn't have a big movie for it, but...
You can't have all the big movies done. Well, you can, actually. You do.
No, Disney has some.
So we'll ask the obligatory window question, which is, as we know, also very important. Paramount has come up with what I think is a pretty innovative plan to try to take away that time period when a movie isn't available in theaters nor in the home. Do the rest of you support what Paramount is doing? Do you plan on trying the same thing?
Well, I mean, Paramount will speak for Paramount. For us, we are not, with our sort of tentpole-driven strategy, that's not a path that makes sense for us.
I should have added, the Paramount's doing with genre titles that tend to burn out quickly.
So for us, we have expanded the window in terms of releasing a picture in March, whereas before we didn't go to March or in August. Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy. So we've expanded the window. We think, okay, March, April, May, June, July, August now, November, December is 8. And we have 8 tentpoles in the fiscal year commencing October 1st. So we need to expand our own calendar internally to have a picture in March, a picture in April, a picture in May, a picture in June, and so on. In terms of that strategic decision about whether or not to adjust the window vis-a-vis the exhibition community, we're not going there. We're not going to do it.
I would say, our mandate is to make theatrical, experiences and global. I mean, one of the great strengths of Fox is its global reach and the, incredible operations that were built up by Tom and Jim. And so, the mandate is to keep that operation firing on all pistons.
Yeah, I think the issue is a pretty straightforward one, which is you have an audience that's evolving. And certainly from an entertainment standpoint, consumers aren't really looking 6 months in advance. We talk about in terms of these events, and they tend to take place in a week or two when people are very focused on these films. The real question in terms of the long-term health of the business is when you're spending all this energy in marketing and there's all this conversation going on for a movie, and then there's certain movies that are in theaters for 4 or 6 weeks.
Right.
What is interesting in terms of the way this has been characterized is that the fact of the matter is the issue is we're not invading the theatrical window. That's where it's been oddly talked about a lot. The issue is actually preserving the theatrical window, but then saying that the digital window should float based upon when you're out of a movie theater so the audience can always see a movie. Because the one real challenge we have is you have an audience growing up who has infinite choice, and infinite choice always, whether it's video games or television or music. So to have a window for a movie where you can't actually buy the movie is an odd conversation to have with your teenager when they want to watch a movie. It's like, oh, you can't buy that, and no, I'm not okay with you watching the pirated version. So it is an interesting dynamic that we've created for ourselves. So we tried to basically say that the theatrical run, when it ends, is what should dictate the next window versus 90 days, which I want to see somebody convince your own teenager that they need to wait 90 days for anything. And so our point is you should go to a movie theater to watch it, but then once it's out of a movie theater, you should be able to buy it. And that it's as simple as that. Now, what's been interesting in terms of the exhibition reaction is there's certainly been a number of exhibitors who are like, we want to figure out how to evolve and innovate.
Right.
The pressure inside of the exhibition community has been such that 7 chains announced that they were doing this with us. The next group of people said, please don't announce, because we don't want the pressure of people getting upset at us because they think this is the beginning of the end. As opposed to where our point is, we're trying to make sure that we have the best economics and we preserve the theatrical window. Now, a circuit can be 1 theater, it can be 500 theaters. We have 200 circuits who've now signed up for this.
So you're telling me those 200 circuits will be playing Paranormal, but they don't want you to make that public? Well,
they
will
didn't
be
want
public,
an announcement
right?
because they didn't want, there's so much pressure in terms of this issue of people feeling like this is the beginning of the end. The odd part of it is it's particularly structured to preserve the theatrical window. But it is certainly an issue that's very emotional. It's very emotional in a number of exhibitors. The interesting part also is the people who haven't played it, no one has actually made a counter-proposal to say this is actually what we think would work. They've either been in or out. It's been a very novel series of conversation.
Well, along those lines, is it time for theater owners to be a little bit more...
They are talking about it. Theater owners are talking about dynamic ticket pricing. They understand, they see people trying to come over the wall. There are a lot of television services that are talking about day-and-date releases, that are talking about windowing issues. So everybody knows that it's a reality, that life has to adjust.
Right.
And so they are talking about it. At the last exhibitor convention in Las Vegas, there was a lot of conversation about dynamic ticket pricing and exactly what Rob is attempting to do. The issue is they're afraid to do it. They want to talk about it. They want to daven about it. They want to think about it. They want to analyze it. They're just afraid to do it. So the issue is, do you test? How do you get people comfortable to understand the dynamics of what's going to actually happen long term to try to move the ball forward? I think everybody knows that the ball is going to be moving. And now it's just a matter of how to do it, and how to do it in a way that doesn't create animosity and warring factions.
And I have to compliment AMC, because they've been very aggressive about the whole point of this is how do we partner together to get people to show up to a movie theater? And it is a little bit of what my hope is relative to Star Wars versus a lot of the concern is that, again, J.J. Abrams is an incredibly talented filmmaker. You have one of the most interesting, exciting properties in the world. Hopefully that brings people to movie theater and they have a good time, and therefore they want to see more movies. That's the hope for all of us, is that people love going to a movie theater and they keep going to a movie theater. Right. And that is what we're trying to do, is how do we make sure people keep coming to movie theater and buying tickets? That is ultimately the goal.
All right, I'm going to ask the fun question, fanboy and girl question. What memorabilia, if any, did you guys collect when you were kids? Alan, did you collect anything?
Baseball cards from the Brooklyn Dodgers.
No movie memorabilia?
Not really. Not really. I will say that when Star Wars first came out, that was a huge thing, but I was already like 40.
You're now 107?
Well, I'm just, let's say I'm single-handedly bringing up the average age at the table. But I didn't have much exposure to either movies or television as a kid growing up. I didn't. It's not like it was a big thing.
I didn't collect memorabilia. Everybody here knows my nose was in a book. But I do collect something from my experiences now, which I treasure. I bind and have signed each and every script that I've ever worked on or been, associated with, the good and the bad. And so, it's wonderful when you can just pick one out of the bookshelf and see, oh goodness, Brad Pitt's second movie on Legends of the Fall, or the other one, I'm not going to say, there are many in that bookshelf where you just go, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But I keep them all.
But you love all your children.
Yeah, and that's the part of the business that I love so much, is that first inspiration from a screenwriter's imagination, and so that's what I've chosen to keep.
Rob?
I really was not into movies. I happened into the movie business by accident. I needed a job and started work at Warner Brothers. But I have one of the original Clockwork Orange poster because it was one of the first movies I worked on at Warner Brothers. So that's pretty cool. And I collect or retain, some posters along the way, but not really as a kid. Skateboards and surfboards and stuff like that.
Donna, what did you have?
I wasn't a movie memorabilia collector either. I don't think it was available on the Isle of Wight. But I did collect stamps. I lived on a tiny island, 16 by 26 miles long, so stamps were my way off. They were my way off the island.
So
and so I think I don't have them. I think my parents have them.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, but that was probably where my love of the whole world and cultures around the world was reflected in my stamp collection.
I had and have to this day a signed picture that says "To Tommy" from Brooks Robinson when he made the last out in the 1966 World Series. But no, I wasn't a movie memorabilia collector either. And now I try to limit it to, I try to look forward, not backward. I have a few really prized items. I have a child life preserver signed to me by Jim Cameron that says "To a fellow survivor," because it was a difficult trip. And I have the original Wilson, but mostly I have pictures of my children.
Rob?
All right, this is not going to surprise Pam at all. I was like a consumer of baseball statistics and was like a reader of the original book that like inspired Billy Beane and Moneyball. Like I read that book when I was a teenager and was like, just read it like as a page turner. But so it's so exciting now that at least we made a movie with Michael Lewis. We just adapted The Big Short. Stacey had a conference once where she had Billy Beane there. I was like the geek in the front row going, oh my God, Billy Beane. So, and now, like I said, Michael Lewis, who's had 2 books that turned into Best Picture candidates, we now have made a book with him. So I try and not be too much of a geek, like gushing over Moneyball when I see him, and try and just focus on talking about The Big Short.
I think what's interesting about just listening around the table is the serendipity of life. Is that when it's clear that people come to these jobs a variety of ways through a number of pathways, and it's not like anyone sat around at 7 or 8 and said, I'm going to be a movie, and I'm
going to be a movie studio.
No, it's just a serendipity of life, and I'm sure they're all very interesting stories, actually.
Well, I was in love with the movies, I will say that.
Well,
I didn't collect memorabilia, but because the girls were so pretty.
Speaking of that, what is the first movie each of you remember seeing in a theater?
I think it was House of Wax, which I saw. They had no ratings back then, and it was the scariest thing in the world. I got over it. I was in my early 40s. I finally got past it.
No, really, how over?
No, I think it was Bambi.
Oh, Bambi, that was scary, though.
Yeah, well, it's the Disney tradition of knocking off the parent.
Exactly. Stacey?
I remember Sound of Music, and I remember Oliver distinctly. I don't know if they were the earliest, but they were the most vivid.
10 Commandments. I lived in a small southern town where the theater was only open on weekends, but they opened it up on a Wednesday, so the school went and saw 10 Commandments.
Donna, what on the Isle of Wight?
Before I moved to the Isle of Wight, I lived in the suburbs of London, and I saw Fantasia, and it scared the living daylights out of me. And I don't think I went back into a movie theater until ABBA the movie, directed by Lasse Hallström.
Are you really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fantasia's scary. It's very psychedelic.
I don't remember the first movie I saw, but I remember the first movie I saw twice back to back. And that was Lawrence of Arabia, and that changed my life.
Wow. It's a long one.
Yep.
I was gonna say the first movie I remember seeing twice was Star Wars, so I'll continue to help Alan's business.
It's no full of you. Well, thank you guys very much for coming in. It was great. We learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.